Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our credit presentation. My name is Magdalia Gomez, and I'm our Community Engagement Manager, and I'm joined with Sarah Scruggs, who's our Community Engagement Specialist. Sarah and I will be presenting today together, and we also will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, you'll be hearing from either Sarah or myself. A little bit about HUECU for those of you that may not be familiar with us. We are Harvard's not-for-profit financial institution. We hope that you are a member, and if you're not, we welcome you to join us. And if you are a member, do keep in mind that anyone within your household is also eligible for membership. Before we get started, we just want to make sure that you're able to hear us and you know how to ask questions. We are here for you. We're here to help you better understand credit reports, credit scores, and how to choose a credit card. And in order to do that, we want to make sure you can ask us questions throughout. We have gone ahead and muted you, but you do have the ability to ask questions using the questions panel, which will be on the top hand navigation or the right hand. It ultimately will depend on what platform you logged on with. So just to make sure that you know where that is, please let us know what questions you have about credit. So just drop it in the questions panel. What are some questions that you have about credit? And if you don't have a question, just let us know where are you joining us from. So either let us know what questions you have about credit or where are you joining us from. I'll give you all a couple of seconds to do that. And once I see that we've had a couple of questions submitted, I'll move forward because then I'll know that you can hear us and that you're able to submit questions. Okay, so I see someone's joining from Somerville, a couple of folks from Boston. Okay, seeing a lot of good questions that are coming in as well. Wonderful. So thank you everyone for using that questions panel. Please continue to do so throughout today's session. Sarah and myself will send you an email, so you'll have a copy of the presentation. You will also have a copy of the recording and additional resources and our contact information. So if you think of something in the future, you're more than welcome to contact us or contact our support center directly. So we're going to jump right in. How exactly does credit work? We know for some of you, you may have had credit for years, and maybe you feel like, you know what, I know this part. For some of you, you may have had credit for years, but still not quite sure how it works. And if that's the case, either way, we want to make sure we're all on the same page because all of our backgrounds are different when it comes to finances. For some of us, we just have more expertise in it, others not so much. So we just want to make sure we're all on the same page before we get deeper into credit. So how exactly does credit work? Well, before we talk about how credit works, I actually want to show you why it matters. Here, we're going to show the impact of your credit score. The person with the highest credit score tends to be the individual that will save the most money when they borrow debt. So here you can see someone that has a credit score of 720, between 720 and 850, and this is just an example, as you'll see many other examples today, but just they're examples, so let's focus on the concept, not so much the specific numbers. But in this case, let's say someone has an 800 credit score. For this product, and we just made use an example from FICO for a card loan, that individual would pay $741 a month, and their interest rate, annual percentage rate specifically, would be 4.23. That is significantly lower than an individual who perhaps has a 650 credit score. That individual would pay 11.29% for that same exact product. And why does this matter? Well, it ultimately is going to impact our budgets. It's going to impact our cash flow. For the individual that has a lower credit score, in this case, we're going to just go with 500, they will ultimately end up paying an additional almost $5,700 more than the individual that has the lower credit score. So this is why you will ultimately hear very often people say that having a higher credit score will save you more money. And ultimately, this is why it matters. But what exactly is credit? Well, credit, I actually like to start a little bit backwards on this slide. I like to say credit isn't. Credit is not when you pay for something using debit or any other income that you currently have. Credit is ultimately a loan. You're paying for something by borrowing funds from typically a lender and then repaying them over a period of time for a set interest rate. So it's ultimately when someone's lending you money, they're lending to you based off of credit. I do want to point out, we get this question often. Well, what if I go to a store and I use my debit card and say that I want it to be credit? That doesn't impact your credit score. That doesn't impact because it's not credit. Anytime that the funds are pulled directly from your account, that won't be credit. The reason, it's really just behind the scenes how that business is going to get access to your funds, whether you say credit or debit. It doesn't actually impact your credit score. So just keep in mind, this is something a lot of our international members sometimes will get that question because credit is different in many places, especially in other countries. But for us here at the US, if you use your debit card, that will not impact your credit score because you're not borrowing money, you're pulling money from your checking or savings accounts. Now, when it comes to your credit, there are going to be 3 credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, that are going to be collecting information. So what exactly are they collecting? Why are these credit bureaus important? They're going to be the keepers of information regarding money that you've borrowed, money that you have repaid, any potential money that you have not repaid, and also public records. All of this information is on your credit report. Now, there are 3 different bureaus, as I mentioned, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. These 3 bureaus are separate entities, just like you could have 3 different search engines. You can have Google, Bing, and MSN. I don't even know if they have a search engine, but insert a third one there. So just like when you do a search for anything, they're going to be different results. The credit bureaus are similar in that way. They are all going to be different. They'll have a lot of similarities, but it's not always laid out. Well, it's never, I should say, laid out in the same format, all of the information. Also, just because there are more than 3, but the 3 big credit bureaus are Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. And even though you may have a car loan or any loan, anything that you're borrowing, it does not mean that it will appear on all 3 credit bureaus. That's an important piece to note because oftentimes we get the question, well, is my credit score going to be the same with all bureaus? Not necessarily. And in fact, very rarely will they be the same because we have to remember there are 3 separate entities that are collecting your information. And Sarah will get into much, much more detail about managing your score. So I won't go into too much now. But because there are 3 separate entities, they're collecting separate information. Not all lenders will report to all bureaus. So let's say that I'm a small business owner and you borrowed funds from me. I may not report to all 3 of the bureaus. As a business, maybe I can only afford to manage or pay for reporting to one. Maybe I can only afford, it's just easier for the logistics of my company. I may just report to Experian. I'm not required as a business to report to all credit bureaus. And therefore, there are times that information on one report will not be the same as other. Also, there could be differences if you co-signed a loan for someone. That information will be on your credit report. But if you co-signed and that lender only reports to Experian, it may not appear, or it will not appear, I should say, on your TransUnion or Equifax. For information to appear on your credit report, it has to be reported by the lender. And I see a lot of good questions coming in, so thank you so much for submitting those. We'll take a couple of minutes shortly to go through, so continue to submit questions. Thank you. Okay, so I did talk about the credit report, but just so that we all have it in front of us and it's a little bit easier, when it comes to your credit report, it's going to have information about debt that you've owed, your account history, and if you've asked for credit recently or credit inquiries, that request of history would also be on your credit report, collections accounts, and specifically even if it is not based off of credit. So for example, this is very common with our population because we have a lot of folks that will move in and out of our area for school, for work. And sometimes in the moving process, maybe you had a utility bill, thought it was paid in full. You moved out, the roommates didn't pay it, it was still under your name. Those utility bills that are not paid can end up on your credit report if they are reported to a collection agency. And a collection agency, what they do is they essentially will collect the funds that you owe that business, but they will then charge you sometimes up to 30%. That's the highest that I've seen, but it's not always that high. But they will charge you for that past due balance that you owe that other company. And sometimes collection agencies can also be internal to that business. Your payment history will also be on your credit report as well. I want to take a moment and do a very quick poll. And I want to know, have you pulled your credit report in the last 3 months? So you should see a poll now, and please let me know, have you pulled your credit report in the last 3 months? Thank you. I see that some of you are still voting, but overall, wow, this is a great group. I don't think it's ever been this high. So most of you have, excuse me, most of you have pulled your credit report. Wonderful. Very good to see. For those that have not pulled your credit report, please don't feel bad. Life happens. You have, maybe that could be one of the things you put on your to-do list for this weekend is pulling your credit report. So when you can go to many different places to pull your credit report, but I want to point out the one that is recommended by the federal government. Is actually mandated by federal law that the credit bureaus provide you your credit report for free through this website. And that is annualcreditreport.com. It does not, it is a .com. It is free, but doesn't have the word free in it. But it is the website that is required by federal government for the different bureaus. It's something that typically used to be annual, hence the name annualcreditreport.com. But because of COVID, they have allowed, or the bureaus, I should say, are now providing the reports once a week for free. And part of the reason for this is in the past, well, recently because of COVID, a lot of lenders have allowed consumers to skip payments, to defer, to pay less. And the credit bureaus and others wanted to make sure that people had more access to their credit report to verify that the agreements that they made were accurately being reported on their credit report. So it was something that actually was supposed to end. It started last year. I think it was on March or April. I forget when it started, but it was going to end next month, and they actually have extended it through April 2022. So for those of you that have not pulled your credit report recently, or even if you have, know that you can continue to do so once a week. It will not impact your credit score, and you can get the information directly from the source. Oftentimes we get the question, well, what about if I pull my credit report from an app, or I get my credit score information from an app? Is that accurate? It is accurate. This, however, annualcreditreport.com is directly from the source. May not always look the prettiest, but you're going to get the most detailed information because you're getting it from the source. Anywhere else that you get it from, that organization, that financial institution is getting the information and then presenting it to you in a different way. Annual credit report is giving it to you directly from the source. So I always recommend folks do that so that at least you have the actual information. Sometimes it helps to see a couple of examples. So we do have some examples here just to show you what credit reports can look like and how to read them. In this example particularly, we pulled it. I pulled this years ago, but the concept and information is still accurate. This is one that I pulled using Experian, and I pulled this as a lender. So it's a very different, it could be very different from what you see when you pull it as a consumer. Here you can see a couple of different things that I want to point out. And Sarah will talk about the scores, but I think it's helpful for you to see it before she speaks about it. So in this case, the credit limit is $5,500. The highest balance that they've carried is $5,400, and their current balance is $4,200. That's going to have a negative impact on score, and Sarah will tell us about that later. One of the questions that we get often is, well, what if I pay my credit card in full every month? In this example, you cannot tell if this individual has paid in full. You can tell that they're current, which is the C, but you cannot tell how much they're paying every month. You can tell the upcoming monthly payment. In this case, it's $127. And that 127 is often the number that is used by lenders when they're determining your debt to income ratio. They're determining, oh, what are the monthly payments that they have? They typically will use the scheduled payment. So even if you're paying more, they typically just go with the scheduled payment. Here you see another example. It's Comcast. It is a utility bill. I had spoken about this earlier. Even though it's not a credit card, but an account that a member had with Comcast, it did go to a collection agency. And here you can tell that it's fairly past due in this situation. It says seriously past due. It also will show that it's been past due for more than 90 days. And if you look at the amount, it's relatively small. We're talking about $310. This individual, they didn't know they had this. They then resolved it. Their credit score went up. And that's another reason that it's important to check your credit report, check your credit score, keep an eye on those, because had they known earlier, they would have paid earlier. It was one of those cases they just weren't aware, but when they were looking for a loan and were denied, this came up, and that's why they then realized, oh, I need to resolve this. It just wasn't, they were unaware of it. Most of the information on your credit report tends to stay on for around 7 years, unless the account has been closed or is currently open. Everything else, more or less, it's about 7 years. Credit inquiries will stay on a credit report for 2 years, but it's not so much how long it stays on it, it is what is the impact. And Sarah will talk about the impact on the credit score specifically, but just know, even though it's on your credit report for 10 years or 7 or 2, that doesn't mean it's going to be impacting your score for that time period. There are times when you pull your credit report that some of the information may be incorrect. It's very common. I will say it's changed a little bit because in the past, when information was reported, they didn't always have to match your Social Security and other data points. That has changed as of, I want to say it was around 2017 or 2018 or so, but it changed a couple of years ago, and now reports are a little bit more accurate. There are still mistakes that are there. If you find a mistake, there are many different things you can do. You can contact the reporting business first, contact the credit bureaus, and you could do different follow-up. The details of this, really the takeaway, if something's wrong, it doesn't have to stay wrong. You have resources to change and update, and you can and should dispute errors if you find them. And there are a lot of resources. The Federal Trade Commission has sample letters. We have a couple of blogs on our blog articles that speak to how to make changes as well. There are times that your information could be compromised, meaning that maybe you logged on to a website and it wasn't a secure website, or maybe there was a data breach. We see these often in the news and the media. And if that happens, there are a couple things you can do to protect yourself. You can freeze your account, or you could put a fraud alert. The fraud alert specifically, that one just gives a business that's pulling your credit report more steps. That means if I have a fraud alert, anytime I'm applying for a loan, or if someone else has my information and apply for it, that organization is going to go through a couple more steps to verify that indeed the person applying is Migdalia. In this case, it's me. Or I could also do a credit freeze. I should say the fraud alerts are temporary, about 90 days, so it doesn't stay on the account for that long. A credit freeze is a little bit more, not permanent, you could always take them down, but it's a little bit more, it's a step up, if you will, from a fraud alert. A credit freeze says no one could pull your credit report. It's literally frozen unless you give them access, either by providing a PIN or you go on the different credit bureaus and unfreeze your credit. I actually have my credit frozen, and it is an additional step. So that is something, if I'm applying for credit, I have to do a little bit more. But in my case, my information was compromised some years back, so I just feel more peace of mind. One of the things when it comes to fraud is if your information is compromised, a lot of fraudsters won't necessarily utilize your information right away. They unfortunately will hold on to it, wait till a lot of people forget that their information was compromised, and then utilize it in the future. So that's just something to keep in mind if you think your information was ever compromised. Know there's a lot here, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to talk a little bit more about managing your credit score and what you can do to essentially help build your credit score, or if you have already a good credit score, how you can maintain it.
Thank you, Migdalia. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Scruggs. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist at the Credit Union, and I appreciate you all joining us this afternoon. A lot of the questions that have come in pertain to what I'll be speaking about, so please know that we will get to those questions. They're just going to be more of what I'm talking about, so hopefully I can answer those for you. And if any questions have come up so far, or if they continue to, please don't hesitate to put them in the questions box, and we'll be happy to answer those. So talking about credit score, this is what a lot of us see. It is that three-digit number that we see pretty often, whether it be on our credit card app. I know that's where mine is, or maybe you have a specific app that you use to check it. Maybe it's on your online banking from your financial institution. But we're able to have a little bit of control over these scores. So let's talk more about them. So what is a credit score? Credit scores measure the risk that a lender has when they lend money to you. So higher the credit score, the better. That is what lenders like to see. This means that they can hopefully trust you with paying back that money in a timely manner when they want it, and paying back the full amount of it. Credit scores are totally independently managed outside of the credit bureaus. So Migdalia talked about the 3 credit bureaus. Now I'm going to be speaking about the 2 credit scoring entities, which are HUECU Score and Vantage Score. Both of those are operated completely separately. So a lot of people like to think of your credit report more of your transcript. So in college, or in high school, this gave you a full readout of all your classes and exactly how you did in those classes, if you turned your work in, that type of thing. And then your credit score is more of your GPA. It really gives no context. It just says, oh, they have this. And so that's how we kind of think of credit reports versus credit scores. The range of scores can be anywhere from about a 300 all the way up to 850. And like I said, you'll want to be as high on the credit score range as you possibly can. So like I said, there are 2 different scoring entities. There's Vantage Score, which we'll get to in a little bit, and HUECU Score. More recently, Vantage has started coming up a lot more, but HUECU is normally the one that you'll see most often. I know with my credit card, I get the Vantage Score, but some people still get the HUECU Score. And that's something that I want you to go and look at. Wherever you do get your credit score from, go and see if you can tell if you get the HUECU or the Vantage Score. Don't have to do it right now, but maybe sometime today. So how is a credit score made? This is a really good question, and I think a lot of us probably have never seen this chart before. Maybe you have no idea really how they get this 3-digit number. To be honest, I really didn't know much about it either. And so the largest portion of our credit score, no matter if it's Vantage or HUECU, the largest portion of our score is going to be made up of our payment history. That means, have you paid your things on time? Have you been paying your debts on time? And I saw a question that's what's the easiest way to improve bad credit? To be completely honest with you, making sure all of your payments are on time is 35% of your score. So if in the past um, maybe you haven't paid things on time, now is the time to start turning that around. That is an extremely easy way to start turning around that bad credit score. Making sure you're paying things on time. That's 35% of our score. We now go to the next largest portion, which is amounts owed. So amounts owed means a couple of different things. It can mean that you have a lot owed on a certain payment. I know that whenever like student loans, let's say that you're a student and you've applied for a federal student loan and your federal student loans are on your hit your credit report, like, oh, they've applied for this loan and it is a lot of money because student loans are a lot of money, your score could possibly drop a little bit. So you'll see that that does have changes in the amounts owed. So when you owe more, your credit score may drop a little bit. The other thing that this also means is that the credit utilization, so that means that if you have a credit card with a $10,000 limit, you do not want to be constantly spending $10,000 on that credit card every month. You want to make sure that you are using about 30% of that credit limit or less every month. That's an extremely important thing to think about and can have a large impact on your credit score, 30%. So always, if you can, keep your credit cards about 30% of the limit or below so that your credit score can go up a little bit. The next highest is length of credit history. For people who have more credit history, your score is probably going to be a little bit higher. Why is this? Well, because if you've been paying on your accounts on time, been doing what you need to do for 30 years, they're going to have 30 years of history to go back and see, okay, have they paid everything? Have they been doing a good job of, making sure they're keeping their limits low and things of that nature, rather than someone who's been borrowing money only for 5, 6 years. They just don't have that length of history. So this one we can't really change, to be honest with you. This one is really up to, okay, when did we get that first line of credit and how old are we now? Then we also have credit mix and new credit. Something to mention about these two, they both make up, they're each 10% of our credit score. So these are not the most important things that we have on our credit score. That's something to remember. Credit mix is making sure that you have both kinds of credit, those being the standard credit or where you pay the same amount each month. So these are things like car loans, mortgage, student loans. Then you have your credit cards. So this is a type of credit where you pay a different amount each month. They want to make sure that you have both of these. Excuse me. But let's say that right now you only have standard credit, so you're only paying a set monthly amount each month. Does that mean that right now you need to go out and get a credit card at this very moment because you need to have a credit mix? Probably not. 10%. So if you don't have both of those loans at this time, that's okay. Probably in your life at some point you will, but it's okay not to have both at this exact amount of time. And then new credit. Have you applied for 5 credit cards in the past year? That shows lenders that, oh, maybe they're looking around for too much money. Maybe that's not such a good thing. So I encourage you, don't just go out and apply for 5 different credit cards within a year. If you are trying to shop around for rates, apply for something within a 2-week period and it won't hit your credit report multiple times. So let's say I'm looking for a mortgage. I can get pre-approved for a mortgage at 4 different places within a 2-week period, and there's only one hard inquiry on my credit report because my credit my credit report understands, oh, she's looking for a mortgage. But let's say that I wanted a credit card in January, I wanted a credit card in March, I wanted a credit card in June. That shows lenders that, oh, she's looking for additional lines of credit a little too often. So make sure that you're not applying for new credit constantly or all the time. And then your Vantage score. Like I said, your FICO score is a little bit different from your Vantage score, but not too much different. So you'll see that the most influential thing is your payment history. Pay your bills on time if you're able to. Pay those loans on time. And if you're not able to pay those loans on time, get in touch with a lender and let them know that you're struggling to make those payments on time and see if there's any way that you all can work together to hopefully conquer whatever loan you might have. And then things that are highly influential, age and type of credit. So this has moved up a little bit in Vantage, is that the length of credit history and the type of credit that you have, and the percent of credit limit used. So making sure that we are not spending more than 30% of our credit limit. Total balances and debt is slightly influential. Making sure that we don't have a ton of debt is a good thing, but it's not going to be make or break for our credit score. And then less influential is those recent inquiries as well as your available credit. So how much can people lend to you at this point in time? So on this slide, we have 3 different examples of sample credit scores. And you'll see their score is going to be in the second column. And these are all FICO scores. The 3 that we'll see right now are FICO scores. And so the score here is a 488. This is on the lower end from that 300 all the way up to 850. A 488 is on the lower end. And so you'll see over here score factor descriptions in the most right-hand column. Score factor descriptions will come with every single credit score. Even if you have a perfect credit score, I'm sure they will still have score factor descriptions there. There's credit scoring agencies definitely see us as always being able to get better at something. So your score factor description, here, the reasons why their score is a 488. They've got a serious delinquency, not just on one account, but on multiple accounts. And so serious delinquency means that you're more than 90 days past due on multiple accounts. So this person needs to make sure they're paying those bills on time and making sure they're speaking to their lender, letting them know, okay, I'll be paying these bills from now on. Ratio of balance to limit on revolving accounts, that's going to be your credit cards. Revolving accounts means you're spending a different amount every month. So this person has above 30%. They're spending above the 30% of their credit limit on their credit card pretty often. And their time since their last delinquency is too recent. That means that they've had delinquency pretty soon from this time period. So not only do they have one, they have multiple delinquencies, they're seriously delinquent, and they're probably delinquent right now. Not something that's happened in the past, but something that's happening right now. And so those are all reasons why their score is on the lower side of things. So let's see another credit score that's going to be more in the middle. You're going to see this is a pretty average score, a 656. There are still score factor descriptions. So why is this credit score at a 656? There is a lack of recent revolving account information. This person does not have a credit card at this time, and that's okay. It obviously hasn't ruined their score. They have a pretty average score, but there are probably some other things on their score factor descriptions that are making this score a little less than excellent at this point in time. So let's look at that. They've got a collection filed, which is probably part of the reason their score is a little bit lower than excellent. And so they've got a collection filed at this point in time. They'll want to make sure that they figure out what that collection is and pay that off. Too few accounts are currently paid as agreed. This person has not been paying their accounts in full on time. Highly recommend that you continue to pay on time as much as you can. And no recent revolving balances. They don't have a credit card. And that's totally okay. The two middle score factor descriptions, the derogatory public account and too few accounts currently paid, are what is impacting their score to be less than excellent at this point in time. For our last credit score, we see that it's a 748. This is a pretty good credit score. With this credit score, you'll probably be getting some of the better rates. And so you can see there's still score factor descriptions. They're still telling us how we can get it higher and how we can get it better. Too few accounts currently paid as agreed. That is the largest piece of the pie when we're looking at a FICO credit score, is that you are paying on time, your payment history. So making sure that we continue to pay things on time. Lack of recent installment loan information. An installment loan is the same as a standard loan. So these can be things like a mortgage, student loan, car loan. This doesn't mean when you see this on a score factor description, this doesn't mean that it's time to go out and apply for a loan just because you see this on the score factor description. It's okay to not always have an installment loan to pay off. This is impacting your credit about 10%, like we saw on the FICO score. Ratio of balance to limit on revolving account is too high. So that means that they have over 30%, they're spending over 30% of their limit. So making sure we keep it below 30% of our credit card limit when we're using our credit cards. And then time since most recent account opening is too short. So just making sure that we have open accounts, but to be honest with you, if I saw this on my score factor description, it'd be okay with me. That's really only making up 10% of the score, and you can see this is not affecting the score to the point of impacting them getting loans or things of that nature. So before we go into options to improve your credit score, there's a couple of things that I want to address. And I think it's important to remember that your credit score allows you to have access to loans that you may need for purchasing things like cars, homes, purchasing things on a credit card. And so it is okay not to have a perfect credit score. I do not have a perfect credit score. And I do this for a living. I don't have an 850 credit score, and that is totally okay by me because my credit score still allows me to get, number one, the best rates on any loan that I could apply for in the future. It also allows me to get the credit cards that I want to have. And so a lot of people will ask us, okay, so I want to get my credit score as high as I possibly can, or get it as close to an 850 as possible. But something that I want to address is that you're not shooting for a perfect score with credit. You're shooting for having credit in a place where you can get the highest rates possible for you, or the best rates possible for you. And you have access to things like credit cards that you do want to use. And so I always recommend too that you don't let this number define you. If your credit score is lower than you want it to be, that's okay. There are ways to improve it and hopefully ways to get access to the loans and money and things that you need to continue living, being here. So those are things to understand about credit scores. There were a couple of questions about how to improve credit, so I want to talk a little bit about those. If you've never had a credit card before, or if you have recently gotten a credit card, you can apply for a credit card, especially if you're a student. I think that's an important thing, is to think through, maybe it's time to get a student credit card. They usually have lower limits, so you're not going to be spending tons of money or going into tons of debt. You could possibly get a special loan. There may be a credit builder loan at your financial institution. And then there's also one-on-one financial counseling. This is what we recommend first. We want to recommend to you one-on-one financial counseling with our partners at GreenPath Financial Wellness. They are a free resource to you that the credit union pays for our members so that you are able to talk through your credit report with an accredited credit counselor, and they can talk through any things that you need to do to possibly improve your score. The reason why I say I would recommend this first is because they can look at your situation, because each of our situations are different, and they can tell you, okay, this is one thing that you can do specifically to help your credit score go up or to help you be in a better position to receive loans in the future. I highly recommend this service no matter where your credit score is. If it's lower than you'd like it to be, if it's higher than you'd like, or if it's very high and you're comfortable with it, this is a great place to start so you can speak with an accredited credit counselor and they will be happy to talk through any of your questions specifically about your own credit report. And like I said, our credit really is just allowing us to have access to funds to pay for things. So the first thing that comes to mind when a lot of people think of credit is credit cards, because that is what a lot of us use these days. I always tell a funny story about how I was out to eat with a group of people, and one of my friends, little girls, saw her putting money, like paper money, into the receipt bill. And she actually looked at her mom and she said, "Oh, we can't pay with that. We have to use plastic." So it's definitely getting to the point where most of us are using credit cards in our day-to-day life. And so how do you choose a credit card, or how do you even know what to look for when you're looking for a credit card? The first thing you need to think about is the interest rates. And this isn't the fun and flashy rewards or anything of that nature that we're talking about right now. We're talking specifically about the interest rates. Every single credit card offer that you receive in the mail or online must come with an interest rate and interest charges sheet and a fees disclosure. This is that um, little black kind of table that you'll receive. It's the paper is smaller than like where the offer is. So you'll see that the interest rates are on there. It tells you what is the APR for all of your purchases. So if you're planning on leaving a balance on the card, you'll want to make sure to see this interest rate. That'll be of very great importance to you. It also will tell you interest rates for things like cash advances, balance transfer, and how to avoid paying interest on your purchases. So here you can see that this APR, this is one of our cards at the credit union, has an 11.74% to 18 point or 17.99% APR based on your credit score. So this is actually a pretty low interest rate for a lot of credit cards. I know I'll be completely honest with you, my credit card has a 25% interest rate. This is because it has some pretty great rewards that come along with it. But if I had the opportunity to go back and really understand that interest rate, I may or may not choose the card that I have. So it's always important to make sure you're seeing this information. And a lot of credit cards at this point in time do have a 0% APR for the first 12 months. And this is something common that you may see. So that would mean for the first year, there is no interest. But then after that year is up, it will go up to anywhere from 11.74 to 17.99 based on your credit score. Some financial institutions base it on your credit score. Some base it on other information, and they have to disclose that to you in this table that you'll see. On the next slide are a little bit more about fees. This is a very important piece of the puzzle when choosing a credit card. An annual fee. This is something that can get really frustrating for a lot of people, because when you get your first credit card, I'll give you a personal story. My first credit card that I received that I applied for on my own, I did not care to look at the annual fee. And now, because it's one of my oldest lines of credit, I don't want to close it because I want to keep that credit history uh, on my report. But unfortunately, it has an annual fee, and I pay the annual fee every year, no matter how much money I spend on the credit card. And so if you see that a credit card does have an annual fee, you really want to make sure that the rewards or points or travel rewards that you'll be getting on the card will outweigh that annual fee in the long run for you. That is an important thing. But if you'd rather not have an annual fee, there are great rewards cards out there that do not have annual fees on them. So if that's something that you'd rather not have, then I highly recommend looking for cards with no annual fee. There are also transaction fees, something to really think about if you in the future will be traveling, um, that does your card have a foreign transaction fee? That's an important thing to think of if in the future you'll possibly be traveling internationally. Thank you, Magdalia. On this slide, you'll see optoutprescreen.com. Maybe you are someone who has enough credit cards, you don't need any more offers. If you would rather not be getting any more mailed offers to your house, you can go to optoutprescreen.com. And this way, you won't be getting those mailings that you have to shred because they have that information on them. So if you'd rather not be getting these, then you can always go to optoutprescreen.com. And like I talked about earlier, our partners at GreenPath Financial Wellness offer free financial counseling, including budget and COVID-19 counseling, as well as that accredited credit counseling. These counselors will walk with you through your credit report or setting up a new budget. This is a service offered to you by the credit union. And not only you, but everybody in your household also has access to speaking with GreenPath. They do a great job of being on the phone, so it is COVID safe. And they offer appointments late into the evening as well. So I highly recommend that you reach out if you have questions. If there's something that you're wondering about to do with finances and basic financial wellness, then reaching out to GreenPath is a great place to start. We have a blog at the credit union where there is great information on credit. I think even just the other day, we may have had a post about 5 tips for improving your credit score or how to pull your credit report. You can see there that that's on the screen now. Our blog has personal finance information ranging anywhere from mortgages all the way to simple things like creating a budget. Like I said, we showed you some information about one of HUECU's credit cards, and HUECU actually has a brand new Platinum Rewards Plus card. And this Platinum Rewards Plus has a 1.5% cash back on all of your purchases. And so this is a really great rewards card if you're looking for one with no annual fee. Like I said, there are some great rewards cards that don't have annual fees, including ours here at the credit union. If you're wanting more information about Platinum Rewards Plus, if you are a member with us, then you can go to huecu.org/rewards -plus. So please know that we are here to answer any questions that you may have about the Rewards Plus card. But if you're interested at all in that or in membership with the credit union, we're happy to answer those questions as well. We do hope that you'll fill out a survey for us so that we can know how we did today. We know that there are still some questions in the questions box that we want to get to, so I'm hopefully leaving a little bit of time for those before we end today. But if you have some time before you close out of the webinar, if you could take this survey for us, let us know so that we're able to continue making these a success for our members. And I believe Migdalia dropped this survey link in the chat box. So if you're able to see that, you'll be able to just click on that link and go directly to it.
Thanks, Sarah. And we did have a couple questions that we can address now. And if folks have additional questions, like Sarah said, we'll be here for a little bit longer. One of the questions, I think, Sarah, you sort of addressed this earlier, but I just want to make sure that we're answering the question. So if there is anything else that we could provide, but how much credit is enough to have? Ultimately, that's going to depend. Sometimes having too much credit could negatively impact you when it comes to your ability to get additional loans. So having a large credit line available to you may actually prevent you from getting additional loans, because an underwriter or the person that's looking at your report may say, well, if they already have access to $20,000 and they're asking for 20,000 more, that may be too much. I would always recommend contacting GreenPath, or they are accredited credit counselors. They can actually look at your credit report and give you very specific information. I know our next slide is a little bit of our general disclaimer, and a lot of what we provide is general overview, but credit is personal, money is personal. So there are things that may be specific to you that could make it so that for you, 20,000 is good enough to have for credit. For others, it's like, well, no, you actually need much more. So we do recommend GreenPath. It will not impact your score. They are accredited credit counselors. Another question that came in: when do late payments fall off your credit score? Sarah did show a chart. It will stay on your credit report for 7 years, but it won't have an impact on your credit score, as it won't have much of an impact if it was months or years away. Like if you had paid late in March, that's going to impact significantly your April, May credit score. But if you paid late a year and a half ago and have continued to make payments on time, that's going to have less of an impact. Another question was specific to how many points does your score go up or down when you pay off installment loans. That is something that we don't know. As I said, credit is so personal that it's not just that specific loan. It's looking at other factors, the other factors that Sarah mentioned, such as other lines of credits that you may have, other payment history. But that is a good question to possibly contact GreenPath. There's also, I know that FICO has a FICO score simulator. Some credit card apps now have started adding those, in which you can actually do different things and it will tell you roughly what the impact will be on your credit score. So I would recommend checking with your credit card company to see if they have one of those. If not, feel free to give GreenPath a call. They do have some resources so that they can estimate, but they will be doing an estimation. Unfortunately, just like any business, it is a algorithm that's protected. So we don't know exactly. What we talk about is general principles, but ultimately it's their algorithm and they do protect that. So we won't know exactly what the impact will be until sometimes after. Very common. It won't be until after that happens. Either you pay off a loan, you are late on an account or something, you open a new account, etc. Sarah, I'll turn it back to you. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but I don't see any additional questions at the moment.
Thank you, Migdalia. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And just want to reiterate exactly what Migdalia said, that this is all so personal, and so we hope to get the conversation going. Hopefully, this is a time and kind of sparks for you the that you now feel empowered to move forward, understanding this information and able to ask questions, and able to know, okay, this is something that I want to work on this weekend, or something that I want to do in the next 2 weeks. Hopefully that this has empowered you with enough information to be able to move forward, to really learn about your own credit score and learn a little bit more about your own credit report, and having confidence to move forward in understanding this all a little bit better.